Is your startup being bashed online? Or are you trying to launch a business and those trolls and haters just won't leave you alone? Well, you're probably also wondering how you can protect yourself from these online attacks. Well, welcome to The Pivot, because that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in this episode with Attorney Pignol, as we're going to be discussing the libel laws under the Revised Penal Code and the Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012. So welcome to The Pivot. I'm James Deacon.
And I'm Attorney Bernice Pignol.
Let's dive straight into the topic. What have we got this week? Break it down for us.
For this episode, we'll be talking about online libel.
Online libel is a little bit different to the libel that we're used to, right? I was today years old, don't worry, when I found that out. And because under the Revised Penal Code, what's different about it? Maybe you can talk to us about the two forms.
Right. So the two forms of libel is, first is the libel that's penalized or punished under the Revised Penal Code, and one that's penalized under the Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012. So it can be committed by any person in two ways. Number one, through publication, and number two, through a computer system.
And to add to that, I think it's very important because nowadays this is the main form of communication. At some point, I think when it came out, 2012, this was just sort of fringe level of how we communicated.
Yes.
Now it is pretty much everything. So this is where we need to put in these laws, correct?
Exactly. It's very relevant nowadays, especially with the pandemic, when everyone's home, everyone's in front of their computers. So you kind of like see all these crimes being committed left and right, and not a lot of people know exactly what's their remedy when they're being the offended party, or what's their remedy if they want to be protected from all these online libel crimes.
You know, another thing that people are probably wondering, if they're anything like me, it's also, where are these lines? I mean, how blurred are these lines? Because you can also say there's a freedom of expression.
That's right.
There's also a freedom to criticize. I mean, we can't just all be saying nice things all the time. We never really move forward. And then if you are a public personality, so maybe you can start by explaining what makes it criminal. I mean, if I say I don't like your dress, by the way, I do like your dress,
Thank
but
you very much.
if I was going to be one of those nasty trolls and say, I don't like your dress is ugly, is that libel? I mean, where do we draw that line?
And so if we go with the definition of the Revised Penal Code, so a criminal libel is defined as a public and malicious imputation of a crime or a vice or defect, real or imaginary, or any act, omission, condition, status, or circumstance tending to cause a dishonor, discredit, or contempt of a natural or juridical person, or to blacken the memory of one who is dead. So if you break that down into elements, you have, first, it must be defamatory, right? Or if it destroys the reputation or the honor of a person. Second, it must be malicious or done without good faith, right? So it's with ill intent. Next element is that it must be given publicity, or it must be published. And then next is the victim must be identifiable. So those four elements laid down by the law are, the parameters that, would answer your question earlier, that within those bounds, you can actually assess if a word or a comment or statement said against you is actually criminal libel.
Okay, well, thank you for breaking that down. That's really important to have those lines there, because I know some people say, well, isn't this just curtailing our freedom of speech? No, not necessarily. You still are entitled to an opinion.
That's right.
But your opinion has to be based in fact.
Exactly.
Correct? So if I was to use that example of, I don't like your dress, or I think your dress is ugly, well, I don't know why I started on your dress, because I really do like it. But that's an opinion. It's not necessary. I mean, it's not polite, but it's still an opinion. What if I was to say, I think you are a criminal? It's still my opinion, but there's something a little bit deeper.
And you would post that.
And I post, let's say if it was even a comment under this politician's page, I think you are a criminal, but I use the word I think. Does that classify or fall under my opinion?
It can be argued that it would still be online libel, because you're imputing or you're accusing me of something, of a crime or a vice or defect, right? So that can fall under criminal libel. And going back to our definition, so I just stated here a while ago the definition according to the Revised Penal Code, and then you go back to the online libel. So what the Cybercrime Prevention Act only says that online libel is the revised penal code libel plus the use of computer or these kinds of technology. So if it's done online, then it's cyber libel. If it's print, like newspaper and whatever, it's the regular quote unquote libel under the revised penal code. And also, just to comment on your contention for the constitutionality, let's say, like everybody has the freedom to speak up their minds, right? But there is also a limit to that. So it's not absolute. So there has to be limitations to your freedom of speech. And also, if you note that, the Constitution was drafted in 1987, which guarantees freedom of speech, they did not contemplate yet that there was going to be an internet or a Facebook, right? Like, who would know, right? So now it's boundless. So now you have these laws like the Cybercrime Prevention Act to kind of like limit the vastness of the constitutional guarantee to free speech. So now you have people to just really limit their freedom of speech because it's not absolute.
Okay, we're going to be breaking down some examples for you, just some test cases and hypotheticals. We might even use some real cases just to give you that idea. But what if I was to use it as a blind item? Ayan, that's popular, diba? In mga tabloids and stuff. They're like, meron kaming kilala na isang ganito. And then
Sino ito?
Yeah, sino ito? And I mean, how do you...
Were you a subject to that blind
many
item?
times.
How would they describe you, let's say?
Isang guwapo na. And as soon as they say
That's
that, it's like, come on,
definitely
that's a dead giveaway.
I know. It's so you should file a case
File
right
a
away.
case. This is Poggy Problems. No. But there
blind items are so prevalent. It's used all the time, right? In showbiz, you still have like.
Do they fall under the? Are they protected here?
It can be. That's the tricky part, and it's very interesting actually. So if you go for a blind item, the person has to be identifiable. You don't even have to name the person, right? That you're trying to bash or whatever, as long as the person is clearly identifiable through that blind item. So for example, the male co-host of The Pivot is just obnoxious and he's horrible and his jacket
there's only one. I get okay. So
right?
you're
So it's very identifiable. Whereas you say that, this influencer who likes to drive cars and, things like that. So it's very, very vast. But in your heart, it's you, right?
Yes.
And I'm not attacking you.
Well, I did start it with the dress, even when they were all
I'm very vengeful. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, but like you see the point here that you have to make it identifiable, right? And so I had a lot of people message me on Facebook for consultations, right? First they'd ask you like, how are you doing, attorney? And then they, ask for free legal advice. But anyway, the most common ones are, attorney, there's this person who's like making me parinig on Facebook. And she's like, oh, this girl is so ganyan, she's so squatters, whatever, right? And then I would check the post and it's actually not identifiable. It's just parinig. So parinig is very different from online libel. So you really have to draw the line there. So you have to be identifiable. So if you're the only person in that street, in that corner of the house, with that same hair color or whatever, then that's you. So you can contend for that before the courts.
Okay, so I mean, cyberbullying, well, that's a whole other show,
That's right.
I think,
Yeah,
that we
that's a
need to
whole
get
episode
into. But what
altogether.
we're doing here is we're really covering under the law what you are entitled to and how you can protect yourself. This also opens up the topic of public personalities. How immune are they, or how accountable are they? Some people say if you hold a public position, whether it's on TV or a politician, that you should be open to this criticism. Are there lines that we need to know Where are those boundaries?
But you can't, when you say public personality, it's very broad, right? So it can be a celebrity or a politician, but what the law contemplates, and the Supreme Court would say, is that it's for public officials, let's say. So you have to have the public official has to be in the line of duty, right? So when you're criticizing the person, right, and it's because of his work or his public function, then you can be exempt from online libel. So yeah, it's actually more lenient towards public officials. So you have to take it criticisms. But if it becomes personal, then you draw the line there. So for example, you run for president. I'd vote for you, by the way. You run for president, or you're already the president of the Philippines, right? And then somebody says that, with President James Deacon, the traffic got so much worse. And then so you can't sue that person for libel because it's in the course of carrying out your public function. But when you say, President James is like a horrible individual and he's immoral or whatever, right? So that could be a ground for online libel.
Okay, I mean this is probably taken to the extreme, but maybe just as an example, if President James Deacon was there and the traffic, somebody said, well, the traffic's been so much worse since President James Deacon took over, but it wasn't. I mean,
Oh, right.
it would make you a snowflake if you were president and you went after one citizen that said the traffic was worse and you could prove that it wasn't. I mean, you have to learn to take this criticism,
right,
but
yeah.
could they?
Yeah, that could be another exception to what I just said earlier, no? So that falls under the fair comment rule. So if your comment was not fair and it was like, reckless and there was really absolutely no truth to it and you couldn't back it up with facts, then again, you can be sued for libel. So there are these nuances, and like exceptions to the rule and, so.
Okay, but
yeah.
I mean, I think what we're trying to make sure you understand here, what we're trying to lay out here is this is the framework and this is where your boundaries are and
That's
where
right.
you can get protected. Most times you won't need to go through this, right? I mean, if you're in the case of somebody making panic, whatever,
Yeah.
even if you are within the office of the president, that's why you have a spokesperson that should basically rebut these things and just discredit them without going through the courts.
So we talked about public officials and you mentioned public personalities. So as a person who's relatively has a following, like a large following on Facebook, you are considered as a public personality. Like, have you handled or faced these kinds of online attacks?
Not this week,
Not this week.
but
Thank God.
every
Thank
week
God.
before.
Not today.
No, yeah, a lot. Yes,
Right.
definitely. And sometimes you have to roll with the punches, which is why I'm asking these questions, because it does happen a lot, and a lot you just have to ignore. But there are times where you just can't. There are times where they're calling into question either your honesty, your morality, etc.
credibility.
Yes, your credibility. So yes, it does happen quite a lot. And what's more frustrating is when the news outlets pick it up and they know, for example, that you are not. They know that your intent was not there. They know that there is no problem, but it's just too juicy a story.
Right.
So this is where it can get very, very difficult if you become the flavor of the internet for the day. It's like the facts be damned. Never mind the facts, just run with the story because it's juicy and let's just.
Have you
it's
ever
like-
tried to sue like any one of these?
No, I've never tried to sue. I've been sued, funnily enough. But before I get into that, it's like, for example, I think there's one happening at the moment with Joe Rogan a week or two ago, that when it's hit this sort of boiling point, or it's brought this to the surface about misinformation or reframing. Now, he's complaining that the networks in the US were framing his situation unfavorably, deliberately, to make him look bad. They were saying that his ivermectin was horse paste, horse dewormer, horse medicine. Technically true, but there is a human version and there's a veterinary version. His argument is they knew it was the human version because I said it, and the only information they got, the only way they knew I took ivermectin was
Right.
because I said it, and I also said it was prescribed by a human doctor for
Right.
people,
Yeah.
and he can afford
And
people
they kind
medicine.
they spliced the video and that made it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the
Okay.
question to you here is that this is not necessarily black and white libel because
Yeah.
as some of the networks are defending themselves, well, it is used for horse deworming. Yes, it is, but that's not the version he used.
Right.
Yes, but it's the same name. Yes, but now this is where it gets
Sure.
tricky because they're using
The
their
lines are blurred.
the lines are blurred and they're using it to bully and reframe it. So that's where I get a lot of that. I can relate to Joe in that because I know that the media outlets already know the outcome, the result.
Right.
They
Right.
know what they know that that's not it. That's not the issue. But they'll just keep on just stoking that flame.
Yeah, but has it like really impacted your professional life or your business or whatever?
Funnily enough, it always impacts it for the better. It's not to
okay.
say that I invite this. Please don't. But there is such a saying to any publicity is good
Is
publicity,
publicity,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. So there is such a thing. So long as it's not, you're not really convicted of anything, or you're not really like, oh, that guy stole this, or he did
Right.
this horrible thing. But it's just chismis. What it does is it gets your name out there,
Okay.
and then basically people forget what your name was out there for, but then the name recall is still there. So in many ways, they still do you a favor. But if you're asking me personally, it hasn't impacted me yet negatively. Of course, as a human being, I'm like, what the hell is this?
Right, yeah.
But that's why I've learned to roll with the punches because it's part of public life. And you can't be such a snowflake as well. You can't take every single person to court that you don't like what they said.
That's good.
But you just have to sort of at least know your rights because sometimes it is a case of being able to just tell them, listen, stop right there. That's
right,
enough.
yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because I'll let it go, but if
That's
you take
right.
it past this point, I know my rights too. And this is why we're discussing it.
Yeah, that's right. You have to draw the line because in my experience, I'm not an influencer, but like last election, my dad ran for public office and the trolls were like incredibly insane. Like they go and attack in droves, right? And I think it's very methodological.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very systematic. Right, so there's one like headquarters for it maybe,
Yes.
and they just attack you at the same time. And so sometimes you just want to put your foot down and kind of like deter future attacks by just filing a case, maybe just one, as an example for all these people. And what's tricky about the law is that when the attacker or the troll is actually unidentified and uses like a fake account, that's very challenging. But I'm also here to tell you that it's not impossible to sue these kinds of people. And so when the attack becomes really heavy for you, Tito James, you know who to run to. I
And
got
for
you
anyone
back.
else out there
That's
as well,
right,
this is
yeah.
precisely what the show is for, is to give you this gateway into knowing your rights and also being able to exercise it should you find yourself in that position, because we can also back it up. Attorney
Exactly,
Piñol you've handled some pretty high...
That's right, yeah. But
high
I'm not
profile-
allowed to say it.
Okay,
you know.
but she has handled some
Right,
high-profile
yeah.
libel cases as well.
And I do sympathize with personalities like you, because you're in the public arena and everything. But somebody has to protect you also, and somebody has to draw the line, right? Because somehow subconsciously, in the extreme scenarios, let's say, it could affect your mental health,
Yes.
your profession, your businesses, and that's why we also want to help, business establishments and corporations, let's say, to protect their reputation from these kinds of trolls, because it's very real. I mean, you have, businessmen who are doing their best to kind of like thrive in these times of the pandemic, to have businesses, and you have online attackers just relentlessly attacking them for no reason and just trying to bring them down. You have to also know your rights as a business owner and to just try to find justice for yourself in these kinds of things.
What's really tricky about this is, when you once it's said, you cannot
Exactly.
you
You
cannot
can't take it
unfeel
back.
that.
That's right,
So
yeah.
it becomes something that even if they don't prove it, they just put the seed of doubt.
Exactly.
And then that carries on. But this is perhaps something that the other side of what we're trying to achieve is, one, of course, know your rights. The other side is, if you are part of the audience there, don't take what you hear and read online
Exactly.
as gospel unless that
Exactly.
person is willing to put their name and their reputation behind it. So if you see a no-name troll going and hating on somebody, your automatic default reply or in your head should be, this is just fake.
Exactly.
Because if they can't use their real name, just don't give them any more credibility.
Exactly.
Zero. We have to also starve them of that, because there needs to be accountability until we work that out and get some kind of an internet birth certificate or something where every time we are online, we are verified, because that's the only way we're going to fix this troll problem. But that's
right.
going to be a while from now. So what you can do for yourself at the moment is, anytime you read something that is not substantiated and that person won't put their name to it, just take it out of your head.
Exactly. And these kinds of online debates, could just like take up so much of your time. I used to engage in these things before, but you waste like so many hours, right? Just engaging in nonsensical topics. So just let it go. And for me, if it's really libelous, then you file a case, right? It's easy for me to file a case because I'm a lawyer. But for those ordinary citizens, they really don't want to go through all the hassle and everything. But again, you have to draw the line, and if it's too much already, then you have to know that you have a recourse under the law.
Okay, let's flip it around a little bit here, and I can tell you from personal experience. What happens if somebody has weaponized the law against you? Let's say it's happened to me before, where somebody who's just overly sensitive or just wants to make problems for you has actually filed a libel case against me. It got thrown out. It didn't even hit the court. The fiscal didn't accept it. But it was still a little bit of a hassle. And I'm sure there are probably some other people that probably in that situation where they use the law to harass either journalists or anyone.
Right.
Do they have recourse?
Yeah, they do. And it's a very good, flip way of doing things, because earlier we were talking about how to protect yourself from all these bashes, and what about now if you're accused of being a basher? What about if you're filed a case for online libel, right? So what's your recourse? So you go back again to the elements of libel, which we discussed earlier. So one of your defenses could be, first, it wasn't published or something like that, right? Or it wasn't malicious. So you show your good intent in posting that to just raise awareness, and there was really no harm done, things like that. So it's really up to your lawyer to kind of like strategize what your defense will be, but it's very possible to do that. And so another would be perhaps, there's really truth to it, and so you have to back it up with some evidence. So there are other defenses in libel, and it's really not a hopeless case if you're sued for libel. It can be scary, but as long as you know there's truth to it, and you know that you didn't have any ill intent in posting that, then it's fine.
Okay, then let's say you were able to, in like my case, it didn't even get to the courts because the fiscal just said no, this is not going to go through. There's no probable cause here. So, but he tried to file again, and that also failed. But can you file a nuisance case against the person? Can you say, well, this will teach you from doing this again? Otherwise, you're just wasting people's time.
Right.
I mean, not everyone's time is valued the same, right?
That's right, yeah. You can actually file for like malicious prosecution or perhaps unjust vexation just because he annoys you so much because he keeps filing these cases against you. Or you can just countersue. If there's anything that he's done against you in the online space, then you can countersue, right? So yeah, this can be used and weaponized as, a form to oppress or suppress freedom of speech, right? And I've seen this happen also of where journalists were being sued by big politicians who have the money just to silence their opinions about these politicians, right? So there is that slippery slope. And actually there's that, big debate about the constitutionality of the criminal penalty for libel. So that is a very interesting discourse there. So actually, I would actually go for, the non-imprisonment of crimes against of libel, right? So you don't have to imprison, you can just fine, because like for journalists to be imprisoned because of the things that they say can be very harsh.
It is, yeah.
It can be very harsh, especially if it's in their public function or in the course of their duty as a journalist.
And that goes both ways, because I mean, a journalist that's being oppressed and silenced, it's also there have been some very irresponsible ones out there. Oh yes, we've had.
Yeah.
You can really make an argument. Both sides have done really horrible things.
That's right.
And there was an entire era where it was just, they used to call them the ACDC journalists. Remember?
Yeah.
Attack, collect, defend, collect.
Oh,
Either way,
okay,
they're collecting, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's bashing your opponent or praising you, I wonder if ever there's going to be and this is just hypothetical, me as a common person thinking, right? So you've got libel when you say something that's untrue, that's malicious. What about when you say something untrue that's positive? I know that sounds weird, right? But like,
I don't think anyone would sue for that.
No, but are you breaking any law if you're like, if you're the journalist writing about the politician going, ang gandang lalaki nito, he's done
it's a
so,
lie.
yeah, he's done so much and all this. I mean, does that fall under?
I don't think so, because you have to like dishonor or discredit the person.
Okay,
right?
so it's very specific to dishonor, not necessarily for just
right.
not telling the truth.
Yes, so that could be like a form of an attack if you're just being sarcastic about it, right? So you can be sarcastic and say it positively.
While we're into these gray areas, where does satire fall in all of this?
Interesting.
Yeah, right.
Do you have like a comedian in mind? I think you do.
I follow this, but it's not local. But I follow this this Twitter account that's absolutely hilarious. That basically is a satire site, and it shows you how ridiculous some of the situations are by using satire.
Right.
But are they protected? I mean, if somebody used to come up with a satire site here, what parameters do they have to fall under to make sure that they are not accused for libel?
Right. They can just state it in like without identifying the person, right? Or it's just pure comedy. They could just defend it that way. But yeah, for satire, I think these comedians are actually prepared to be sued with libel or defamation or whatnot. But it can be a defense that there was really no ill intent. So it's just really for a good laugh. But I've also seen cases where some like radio programmers and whatever broadcasters were sued because of that for a joke or whatever. So it just goes back to the ill intent or the malice. So if there's no malice, you can prove that there is no malice, then you don't need to face these liabilities. What are you looking at?
Well, I want to see if I can give you an example.
Okay.
Because
what's the name of the guy though?
No, it's an account called, I think, the Babylon.
I thought you were gonna talk about Dave Chappelle or
Dave Chappelle is
South Park.
Dave Chappelle is a very interesting case too, but I think this one is more to the point. Or here we go. Okay.
Okay.
I'll just read some of their headlines. I'm not
Okay,
going to read
got
the
it.
article, but let's say they come up: dangerous new freedom variant causing people to ignore government and live their lives. You know, I mean,
Right.
they're now there's a
Right.
freedom variant of
Right.
COVID, but they're very, very clearly they state, you know, their verified account too, saying that they are satire. What's some of this? A group of leftists are upset as businesses refuse to discriminate, right? I mean, these are obviously designed
Right.
to poke the bear.
Yeah. It's ironic, it's
yes.
sarcastic.
It's totally untrue, but they say it from the beginning. So as long as they declare their intention, is that enough to protect themselves?
Under Philippine jurisdiction, yes. So
Yeah.
if you just, make sure that there's no malice there, right? And if it's just purely for a joke, then you can get away with it, actually. And I think that's how comedians get away with it, where they just, tread it carefully within those bounds and try to not, be so kind of identify the person or be so specific about things. Or even there's a style, there's a way of journalists going about it when they just ask questions. Right? So, is it really true that this politician is corrupt? You decide for yourself. Something like that, right? But what the journalist really wanted to say was, this person is corrupt, right? So that's how you circumvent the law, and probably that's how I would advise you as a lawyer. No, I'm just
it's the
kidding.
classic meme. How do you say a person's corrupt without saying the person's
Exactly.
corrupt? Yeah,
Exactly.
there are many ways that you
Right.
can get around it.
And
yes.
where did the money come from, and where did it go? So these are the questions we have to ask, things like that. So it's not entirely a statement, right?
And of course, when that you always refer to people are saying they. I love the word they
Right,
because it's very
right.
vague. They, people, have been saying, it's like, who are these people? Where are
Right,
they coming from?
exactly.
And it's basically, those people live in my heart and I want to ask those questions, but I don't want to get sued. And that's where you learn to read between the lines. Now, speaking between the lines, we have a lot of questions between the lines. Can I throw some your way?
Yeah, I'd love to answer.
Okay, so on our past episode, we asked you guys for your questions. So here are some of them from Adonis Flores Jr. Since a corporation is basically an entity personified by law, who then can file for a case of libel or cyber libel on behalf of the company?
It's very interesting, yeah. So the person who can file on behalf of the company is the directors or the authorized representative. So there has to be a board resolution showing that the corporation authorized this person to file the case on behalf of the company, because it has to be a natural person to go to the fiscal's office and actually file for the complaint. So yeah, those are the people who can file the suit.
All right, so the power of corporation, we got that one. So from, this is an interesting name. I hope I got it correct. Gift?
Gift.
Gift?
I think so. Yes.
Very nice name. Anima on Facebook. Since it was discussed that corporate powers are exercised through its board of directors and officers, can a corporation be sued for cyber libel committed by its president?
Right. So since the crime was committed by the president of that company, no, the corporation cannot be sued, because the very nature of a corporation is that it's a separate, distinct personality from its officers. So it's very different, right? And that's why I always advise to incorporate, because then you'd be a separate entity or a separate person from your corporation.
You said that incorporation protects you, right? These troll farms are technically illegal, right?
Right, yeah.
So they're not going to incorporate because they're not even supposed to exist.
Of course.
But if you were able to identify the troll farm, can you sue them as the troll farm? Because they're all, fake names anyway. But let's say you did your own research and you identified that troll farm was operating against this particular candidate or business. Who do you sue?
You actually sue everyone. So you sue them in their individual capacity, right? So since they're not incorporated.
What if he's an organized troll farm? What if this person is funding this troll farm deliberately to attack a candidate or a business?
Still, you have to sue them individually,
Wow.
right? So the leader and everyone who is involved, you can sue them. So since they're not incorporated, they have to be dealt with individually. So, yeah.
Okay, well, I think that pretty much covers quite a lot.
Done?
Let's just do a very, very quick
I
recap.
think we need a part 2 of this.
I think we should have a
Yeah,
part
yeah,
2 because we just scratched the surface. But
True.
you know what? We're always here. There's always a way where you can get back to us if you have more questions. We will flash up the contact details there. You can go through the Facebook page, YouTube page,
Yes.
and any other details. We'll keep it on the screen in case you have questions for Attorney Pignol or I, especially about this topic. So just to recap, with the cybercrime law, what would you like people to remember about this Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012? What are the highlights for you that you want to
Right. I think that, it's just a really good reminder for everyone that yes, we're living in times where we're stuck in our homes and we're all bored to death, right? Sometimes. But you have to be careful still of the things that you say online, because there are repercussions. So if it's not like a mental repercussion or like a psychological repercussion for the person that you've been attacking, then there are legal repercussions which you can be answerable to. So you have to be responsible and don't get carried away by your emotions, right? So yeah, always remember that freedom of speech is not absolute, and you really have to be respectful of other people as well. And if you have been sued with cyber libel, there's also recourse for that.
All right, I think that pretty much covers you. I just want to end with a shout out portion because we've got a little community going on here, Attorney Pignol. There's only about 7 of them so far, but hey, community's got to start somewhere, right? And we're glad that you're a part of our community. So I'd like to say hi to JP, to Rose, Tony, Jay, Shami, Jack, and the wonderful people of Kidapawan City.
That's right.
Where's Kidapawan City?
It's in North Cotabato. It's actually my hometown.
I was gonna say,
and that's where all our views come from.
I'm just wondering, all of these, I bet all of these are our personal friends.
Yes, for our first episode, I think they were the ones who just like consumed the whole episode. So thank you very much for all those who watched our first episode, and we hope the second one was informative to you and would help you, in your business and personal life as well.
And if it's not, you can always have us up for libel.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because we did tell you it's going to be a good show. If it's not a good show,
it's going to be exciting.
No, I don't think it works that way, but we really hope that you've learned quite a bit from us today.
Yes.
And again, these are the contact details on your screen in case you really need to get a bit more information, or perhaps maybe you need some legal help yourself. So until next week, my name's James Deacon.
And I'm Attorney Bernice Pignol. And again, this show is brought to you by the law firm of Pignol, Santos and Associates. And we'd like to thank our sponsor, the Aklan Group of Companies. Thank you very much. And again, see you guys next week. We're so happy to have you with us in this conversation. See you. Bye.